I caught my daughter-in-law putting pills in my food, so I fed her the same medicine 76-year-old Beatrice Washington had always prided herself on her sharp mind and strong constitution. But over the past 3 months, she had been experiencing strange symptoms that made her question her health. Dizzy spells, memory lapses, sudden fatigue, and episodes of confusion that seemed to come out of nowhere. What Beatrice didn't know was that her daughter-in-law, Crystal, had been systematically poisoning her with prescription medication in an attempt to make her appear mentally incompetent so Crystal and her husband, Jerome, could gain control of Beatrice's substantial assets. It started when Crystal learned that Beatrice owned not just her house, but also 3 rental properties and had over $400,000 in savings and investments. Crystal had married Jerome specifically because she thought his mother was wealthy and would leave everything to him when she died. But Beatrice was 76 and in excellent health, showing no signs of slowing down or dying anytime soon. Crystal grew impatient, waiting for her inheritance, and decided to take matters into her own hands. Crystal worked as a pharmacy technician, which gave her access to various medications and knowledge about how different drugs could affect elderly people. She began researching which medications could cause confusion, memory problems, and other symptoms that might make Beatrice appear to be developing dementia. Crystal settled on a combination of anti-anxiety medication and sleeping pills that she could crush up and mix into Beatrice's food. The medications would cause drowsiness, confusion, and memory problems without being immediately life-threatening. Crystal began her poison campaign, slowly adding small amounts of crushed medication to Beatrice's dinner. When she and Jerome visited twice a week for family dinners, at first the effects were subtle. Beatrice would feel tired after eating and sometimes have trouble following conversations. But she attributed these symptoms to normal aging, but as Crystal increased the dosage, the symptoms became more pronounced. Beatrice would forget things she had just been told, lose track of time, and sometimes feel disoriented about where she was. Crystal would point out these symptoms to Jerome, making comments about how worried she was about his mother's mental state and suggesting that maybe they needed to consider getting Beatrice evaluated by a doctor. Jerome initially dismissed Crystal's concerns, but as Beatrice's symptoms became more obvious, he began to share Crystal's worry about his mother's cognitive decline. Crystal also began documenting Beatrice's confused behavior, taking videos on her phone when Beatrice seemed disoriented and keeping a journal of incidents where Beatrice appeared to be losing her mental faculties. What Crystal didn't know was that Beatrice had begun to suspect that something was wrong, not with her mind, but with what was happening to her. Beatrice noticed that her symptoms only occurred after family dinners with Jerome. And Crystal, she would feel fine all week, but then experience confusion and memory problems specifically on the evenings after they visited. Beatrice also noticed that Crystal always insisted on serving the food and would become irritated if Beatrice wanted to help in the kitchen or serve herself. Most tellingly, Beatrice realized that she never experienced symptoms when she ate alone, or when other family members visited, only after dinners prepared and served by Crystal. Beatrice decided to test her theory by pretending to eat the food Crystal served while actually disposing of most of it. When Crystal wasn't looking on the evening Beatrice conducted her test, she felt completely normal with no symptoms of confusion, fatigue, or memory problems. The next week, Beatrice ate normally at the family dinner and immediately experienced the familiar symptoms of dizziness, disorientation, and mental fog. Beatrice knew she was being poisoned, but she needed proof before she could take action against Crystal. Beatrice called her longtime friend Margaret, who had been a nurse for 40 years, and explained what she suspected. Margaret was horrified, but agreed to help Beatrice gather evidence. Margaret suggested that Beatrice should save samples of the food Crystal served and have them tested for foreign substances. She also recommended that Beatrice should see a doctor to have blood tests done to check for traces of medication. Beatrice began secretly saving small portions of food from her dinners with Crystal, storing them in labeled containers in her freezer. She also started a detailed journal documenting her symptoms, how she felt before and after eating, and any observations about Crystal's behavior during dinner preparation. Most importantly, Beatrice installed a hidden camera in her kitchen that would record everything that happened during Crystal and Jerome's visits. 2 weeks later, the hidden camera captured exactly what Beatrice suspected. Chris was seen crushing pills with a spoon and mixing the powder into Beatrice's mashed potatoes while Jerome was in the living room watching television. Beatrice had her evidence, but she wasn't ready to confront Crystal yet. She wanted to teach her daughter-in-law a lesson she would never forget. Took the food samples to a private laboratory for testing. The results confirmed that her food contained significant amounts of lorazepam and zolpidem, both prescription medications that could cause confusion, drowsiness, and memory problems in elderly people. Beatrice also had blood tests done, showed traces of both medications in her system, despite the fact that she had never been prescribed either drug. With proof of the poisoning, Beatrice developed a plan to turn the tables on Crystal using Crystal's own methods against her. Beatrice knew that Crystal had a severe anxiety disorder, which she took prescription medication. Crystal was also a chronic insomniac who relied on sleeping pills to get any rest. Beatrice invited Crystal and Jerome for a special dinner the following Sunday, telling them she wanted to discuss some important family matters. Beatrice spent days preparing the dinner, including obtaining some of the same medications that Crystal had been using to poison her. On Sunday evening, Crystal and Jerome arrived for dinner, and Beatrice served a beautiful meal, including Crystal's favorite dessert, homemade chocolate cake. What Crystal didn't know was that Beatrice had carefully calculated doses of lorazepam and zolpidem, and had mixed them into Crystal's portion of the cake. The dosage Beatrice used was slightly higher than what Crystal had been giving her. Not enough to be dangerous, but enough to cause significant discomfort and obvious symptoms. After dinner, Crystal began experiencing the same symptoms she had been inflicting on Beatrice: dizziness, confusion, memory lapses, and extreme fatigue. Crystal tried to hide her symptoms at first, but within an hour she was obviously impaired, slurring her words, losing track of conversations, and appearing disoriented. Jerome became concerned about his wife's condition and suggested that maybe they should go home so Crystal could rest, but Beatrice insisted that Crystal should stay a little longer because she had something important to show them. Beatrice then revealed the hidden camera footage showing Crystal crushing pills and mixing them into Beatrice's food. The silence in the room was deafening as Jerome watched his wife systematically poisoning his mother. Beatrice also presented the laboratory results, showing that her food had been contaminated with prescription medications, and blood tests proving that she had been drugged. Jerome stared at Crystal in shock and horror, unable to believe that his wife had been trying to poison his mother. Crystal tried to deny what was obvious on the video, but her words were slurred and her thinking was impaired by the same medications had been using against Beatrice. Beatrice then explained that Crystal was currently experiencing the effects of the same drugs she had been using to make Beatrice appear mentally incompetent. She told Crystal that this was what she had been feeling for months. The confusion, the disorientation, memory problems, the fatigue. Crystal began crying and tried to apologize, but Beatrice was not interested in apologies, she was interested in consequences. Beatrice informed Crystal and Jerome that she had already contacted the police and that Crystal would be facing charges for elder abuse, attempt poisoning, and fraud. She also revealed that she had consulted with an attorney about pressing civil charges for assault, emotional distress, and attempted theft of her assets. Jerome tried to intervene, asking his mother to reconsider pressing charges against Crystal, but Beatrice was unmoved. She told Jerome that Crystal had not just been poisoning her, but had been systematically trying to make her appear mentally incompetent in order to steal her property and money. Beatrice also pointed out that Jerome had been complicit in Crystal's scheme by documenting her supposed mental decline, discussing the need for guardianship or power of attorney. Jerome protested that he had genuinely been worried about his mother's health, but Beatrice showed him Crystal's journal documenting her poisoning activities and her research into medications that could cause dementia-like symptoms. The police arrived within an hour, and arrested Crystal for elder abuse and attempted poison. Jerome was not charged, but was warned that he could face charges if evidence showed that he had been aware of Crystal's activities. Crystal was taken to the hospital to be treated for the drug overdose. Administered, then transferred to jail, where she was held, pending trial. The next morning Jerome came to Beatrice's house to beg her to drop the charges against Crystal. He claimed that Crystal had been under stress and had made terrible decisions, but that she didn't deserve to go to prison. Listened to Jerome's pleas, but told him that Crystal had made calculated, deliberate choices to poison her over a period of months. This wasn't a moment of poor judgment, but a sustained campaign of abuse. She also pointed out that Crystal's goal had been to steal Beatrice's assets by having her declared mentally incompetent, and that without intervention, Crystal might have escalated her poisoning to more dangerous levels. Jerome asked what would happen to their marriage and their future together. Beatrice told him that was his decision to make, but that she would not have someone in her life who tried to poison her. 3 months later, Crystal pleaded guilty to elder abuse and attempted assault in exchange for a reduced sentence of 18 months in prison, plus 3 years probation. She was also required to pay restitution to Beatrice for medical expenses, legal fees, and emotional distress. Jerome divorced Crystal while she was in prison, telling Beatrice that he could not remain married to someone who had tried to poison his mother. Jerome also underwent counseling to understand how he had been manipulated by Crystal and to rebuild his relationship with his mother. Used the experience to become an advocate for elder abuse prevention, speaking at community centers and healthcare facilities about the signs of medication, tampering, and family financial exploitation. She particularly focused on educating elderly people about trusting their instincts when they felt that something was wrong with their health or their family relationships. Beatrice also worked with law enforcement to develop better protocols for investigating suspected elder abuse cases, particularly those involving medication tampering. Her story became well known in the medical community as an example of how pharmacy employees could misuse their access to medications for criminal purposes. Crystal was permanently banned from working in any healthcare facility and had to register as someone who had committed crimes against elderly people. When Crystal was released from prison, attempted to contact Beatrice to apologize and ask for forgiveness, but Beatrice refused to see her. Beatrice had moved on with her life and had no interest in maintaining any relationship with someone who had tried to poison her. Jerome remained close to his mother, but their relationship was forever changed by his failure to recognize that his wife was systematically abusing Beatrice. Beatrice lived independently for many more years, enjoying excellent health and a sharp mind that Crystal had tried so hard to destroy. She often told people that the most important lesson from her experience was to trust your instincts when something feels wrong and to never assume that family members have your best interests at heart just because they are family. Beatrice Washington proved that being elderly does not mean being helpless, that recognizing abuse is the first step to stop it, and that sometimes the best way to deal with someone who tries to poison you is to give them a taste of their own medicine. Her story became a cautionary tale about the vulnerability of elderly people to family members who have access to their homes, their food, and their trust. But it also became an inspiring example of how courage, intelligence, and strategic thinking can triumph over those who underestimate the strength and wisdom that comes with age. Beatrice had turned Crystal's weapon against her, not out of revenge, but out of justice, showing Crystal exactly what it felt like to be confused, disoriented, and helpless. The experience taught Crystal that actions have consequences, and that the elderly people she had seen as easy targets were actually formidable opponents when pushed too far. Beatrice Washington proved that quiet strength, combined with careful planning, can overcome even the most insidious forms of family betrayal, and that sometimes the best defense against those who try to poison your life is to make them swallow their own bitter medicine.